Good morning. My name is Michael Leon Guerrero. I'm the Executive Director of the Labor Network for Sustainability. I first want to express our sincere appreciation to Congressman Hank Johnson for taking the time to join us today, and for all of you around the country who are joining us to be part of this conversation. If you all could please introduce yourself in the chat box by listing your name, organization, location, and pronouns, we would appreciate it. The Labor Network for Sustainability is a national organization working to build bridges between the environmental, climate, and labor movements to move us further and faster to address the climate crisis. For the past 3 years, we have co-convened the process with partners, grassroots transit rider-led organizations, labor unions, civil rights, disability advocates, faith-based and environmental organizations to build unity around a shared agenda for transit equity. Some of the key organizations include the Amalgamated Transit Union, who co-founded this process, Transit Riders in the United States Together, the National NAACP and several chapters, the Transport Workers Union, Sierra Club, and the Institute for Policy Studies. Our signature event every year on February 4th, Transit Equity Day, commemorates the legacy of Rosa Parks on her birthday and her action to refuse to give up her seat on a bus that catalyzed the Montgomery bus boycott. Around the country in over 50 cities, people are taking action to lift up the intersection of equity, climate justice, workers' rights, the potential to create good jobs, and the importance of our public sector by supporting and strengthening our public transit systems. Transit Equity Day has been officially recognized by local governments, and this year by Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg. The impact of the COVID-19 crisis has had a devastating impact on our communities and transit systems. The pandemic took the lives of many essential workers and people dependent on transit. It also sparked a crisis in transit service and put many systems at risk. For this year's Transit Equity Day, we conducted 2 days of hearings to lift up the voices of those most impacted by the crisis, to develop an agenda not just for maintaining our transit systems, but a vision for the transportation system that we need so that it is just and equitable. Thankfully, the stimulus support for the federal government of $30 billion was approved by Congress to support transit. Congressman Johnson's bill, Stronger Communities Through Better Transit Act, would go further in providing essential funding for the operation of our transit systems. I'll now turn it over to Bakari Height, co-founder of the Martyr Army in Atlanta, to give us an overview of how the meeting will run today. Pass it over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. And as you said, my name is Bakari Height with Labor Network for Sustainability, and I'm also the co-founder of Martyr Army in Atlanta, Georgia. And we are one of many transit organizations that work to bridge the gap between the riders as well as with working within the community to make transit better and to better the experience for transit. So we definitely thank the Congressman for joining us today and discussing what is absolutely a really transformative bill within this country. So I will introduce, so essentially how the meeting is going to go is that we're going to give the Congressman some time to discuss the bill, just kind of the ins and outs of how it's going to work and how it's going to be integrated within the fold of transportation. And then we'll turn it over to questions. Some questions we will ask, and then we'll also give you all the chance to ask questions within the chat. So if you have any burning questions, please prompt them so that when we ask for questions, that we can go ahead and bring it to the Congressman's attention. And then now I will go and introduce Shirley Williams. She has been instrumental in organizing all of this, and she also is absolutely instrumental within Atlanta, has worked with many groups such as Labor Network for Sustainability, as well as for Georgia Stand Up. So Shirley, I will give it to you.
Thank you, Bakari. It is a pleasure to introduce the 8th Congressman Johnson in his 8th term in the U.S. House of Representatives, Georgia's 4th congressional district, which encompasses parts of DeKalb, Gwinnett, and Newton counties, and all of Rockdale County. Congressman Hank Johnson has distinguished himself as a substantive, effective lawmaker and a leading national progressive force, named one of the most effective Democrats in Congress by the University of Virginia and the University of Vanderbilt study. Representative Johnson has proven his ability to get things done. A senior member of the House Judiciary Committee, Representative Johnson has introduced and co-sponsored and passed legislation to level the playing field for everyday Americans. His bills that protect consumers and citizens' civil liberties include the FAIR Act and the Stop Militarization Law Enforcement Act, and the Stop Military Law Enforcement Act is part of the historic George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which was the Congressional Black Caucus's response to police and vigilante violence against African Americans across the country. As a champion for digital inclusion and an open internet, Representative Johnson has pushed to empower low-income and minority communities through digital rights, broadband access, and equality of opportunity online when he was ranking member of the subcommittee on regulatory reform, commercial and antitrust law. In January of 2021, Representative Johnson was named as a member of the House Committee on Oversight and Reform, the main investigative committee in the U.S. House of Representatives. In 2019, Representative Johnson was elected by his peers to lead the Judiciary Subcommittee, Courts, Intellectual Property, and the Internet. The subcommittee has jurisdiction over administration of U.S. courts, federal rules of evidence, civil and appellate procedure, judicial ethics, patent, copyright, and trademark law, information technology, and the internet. In 2017, at the launch of the 115th Congress, Representative Johnson landed a coveted seat on the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, also known as T&I. As a former member of the House Armed Services Committee, Representative Johnson became a leading national voice for the demilitarization of local law enforcement agencies in 2014 after police donned camouflage tactical gear and climbed aboard heavily armored vehicles to confront peaceful protesters in the streets of Ferguson, Missouri, in the aftermath of the shooting death of an unarmed teenager.
Hey, Sherry. Yeah, you could go on and on and on and on with that bio.
Okay.
So let me stop you right there. And, and thank you for that warm introduction. I'm sorry for intruding.
Okay.
But I know your listeners don't want to hear about all of that stuff. They're on here for you know, purposes of equity and the environment, and also you know, my friends on the Amalgamated Transit Union, from that union, and also from the Transit Workers Union on the call, all of the equity stakeholders and you know, environmental justice folks on the call. And I just appreciate the opportunity to be on the call with you all. And so Sherry, thank you for that warm introduction. And for all of the people on this call who raise awareness about important issues that improve our communities. So thank you all so much. For those of you who again have forgotten who I am after that lengthy bio, I'm Hank Johnson, representing Georgia's 4th Congressional District, humble public servant, here to do what's right, what's just, and make a difference for everyday people in this country and across the world. And I'm proud to be with you today to talk about why public transit is an equity issue and legislation that I introduced called the Stronger Communities Through Better Transit Act. So let me start by talking about public transit and the essential and too often unsung role that public transit plays in people's lives and in our communities. Public transit is a lifeline to millions of people who cannot afford or are unable to drive, and it's an essential service connecting people to jobs, healthcare, food, school, and other necessities of life. During the COVID-19 crisis, millions of Americans who do not ride public transit themselves realize that they too are in need of this essential service. According to the Transit Center, a foundation that works to improve public transit in cities across the US. 2.8 million essential workers rely on public transit to get to work. And this includes staff at hospitals, grocery stores, sanitation departments, and excuse me, and many more essential services. Now, if the workers who pick up your trash, administer the vaccine, or stock the shelves at your grocery store rely on transit to get to work, then you too rely on transit, even if you never ride it. And if that were not enough, public transit is also a popular mode of travel for people who can afford and do drive. This is because it is safe, it's affordable, and more convenient than a long commute in congestion. According to the American Public Transit Association, 60% of transit riders are people of color. While failure to invest in public transit harms us all, it disproportionately impacts communities of color and low-income communities. Public transit is also essential to a thriving business community by bringing customers and the workers who serve them. Now, as many Americans struggle to recover financially from the economic challenges of the past year, everyone deserves to be able to get to work in a timely and affordable manner. People also need to pick up their kids from school, shop for groceries, and visit the doctor, whether or not they are able to and can afford to drive. To support our communities, we need robust transit service to connect constituents to the necessities of life across large cities, small towns, and rural villages. Further, by providing people with convenient, reliable, and affordable public transit, we can reduce emissions and congestion while improving economic opportunity for everyone. Speaking of emissions, the transportation sector accounts for nearly 1/3 of total greenhouse gas emissions in our country, the majority of which is from driving. Unfortunately, transportation emissions are rising because Americans are driving more and more. We cannot meet the challenge of climate change without providing more Americans with a convenient and affordable alternative to congested roads and polluting vehicles. More frequently, high quality transit is therefore essential to responding to the threat posed by the change in our climate. That is why I introduced the Stronger Communities Through Better Transit Act. This bill would create a new $20 billion formula grant program annually that would be available to all transit agencies, rural and urban. And its purpose would be to increase service frequency so that people don't have to wait so long for the bus or the train. It would provide additional hours of service so that those who don't work 9 to 5 can still get to their jobs and home again to their loved ones. And actually what I mean is that the bill would make grants available to those who are looking to provide additional hours of service so that people who don't work 9 to 5 can get to their jobs. And also the legislation would provide grants to for those looking to add new frequent service in their communities. Today, the overwhelming majority of federal transit funds are for capital investments to buy new buses or construct new rail lines. While small city and rural services can, can currently use their existing capital grants to support operating expenses, no transit agency should have to choose between operating good service and buying new or additional buses or train cars. Even the newest electric bus will not meet the climate crisis or meet the economic and mobility needs of our communities if it only comes once an hour. Imagine that, waiting an entire hour for the next bus in the sweltering summer late to school or work, and being anxious about your day. My bill will fund more and more frequent service with a focus on disadvantaged communities and communities of persistent poverty. The funds provided in the bill will be in addition to state, federal, and other sources. And this means that agencies can only use funds from this bill to expand service, not to run their existing service, and no state or locality can reduce funding to a transit agency because of this new federal funding. The nonprofit Transit Center found that a $20 billion federal investment in transit operations could mean a 40% gain in service for the Atlanta region. This could vastly improve access to transit when it arrives at least every 15 minutes, all day, 7 days a week. In some parts of the city, that would increase the number of jobs reachable within 30 minutes on transit by a factor of 8. Think about that. More jobs due to greater transit creates a compounding impact and greater opportunities all around. The Transit Center went on to say that such a federal program could yield similar benefits across the country and help lower income families by also reducing racial inequality and greenhouse gases. The Stronger Communities Through Better Transit Act creates that program. And we have a long way to go before this bill becomes law. This week, I joined by colleagues on the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee to improve the INVEST Act, a 5-year surface transportation bill that provides a significant boost in transit funding while also making smart investments in roads and passenger rail. The INVEST Act responds to the climate crisis and will repair our roads, bridges, and transit systems, improve safety, and make significant new investments in transit. Though the bill includes provisions to incentivize agencies to expand service, it does not include a dedicated federal transit operating program. And I'm hopeful that my bill can be incorporated into a final package before it becomes law. So as I close, I'd like to ask for your help. My bill represents a significant change in how the federal government invests in public transit. We need all the support we can get to overcome decades of the status quo and push this bill over the line. So I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you in advance for your support, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you so much, Congressman. That's definitely a wonderful voice that we need to hear in Congress. And I wanted to touch on a couple of things that you mentioned about increasing the service frequencies and how it benefits everyone. And that's something that a lot of people don't realize. And Sherry and I were actually discussing that on Wednesday through Martyr Army's book club, which we're reviewing the book Human Transit by Jared Walker. And something I didn't even know is that the bus stop outside of Cumberland Mall, which is a mall here in suburban Atlanta in Cobb County, was set up for service workers to get to the mall to the service jobs because it was too expensive to drive. And I think that's one thing that's really slept on, is that a lot of people don't realize that it does benefit everyone, because if those service workers can't get to their jobs in the same way that most of these places can't hire people because the wages are too low, then that really stops everything. It stops the whole chain of command for every service that is reachable by this. And I noticed that we have a lot of our friends here from Detroit. Joe Batterman says that this will be a game changer in Detroit, as a lot of their routes are hourly. And we also have our friends from Philadelphia here, who we've been working on many campaigns to shine lights on the buses and how they don't come as often as they would, and especially in a lot of these neighborhoods of color. So this is really a wonderful introduction to Congress, and definitely a game changer, as nothing to this magnitude has ever happened. But You've answered a lot of the questions that we were going to address. And if you want to ask questions for the Congressman, please drop them in the chat now. We'll move on to that portion of the talk now. But you've mentioned the purpose of the legislation and the problems that the bill will address. What's the current status of the bill and what's the process for it moving forward?
Well, thank you for that question, Bakari. The bill is assigned to the House Transportation Committee, and as a senior member of the committee, I'm working closely with Chairman DeFazio to ensure a final transportation reauthorization law includes public transit operating funding. Yesterday, after 19 hours, I joined my colleagues on the committee to approve the Invest in America Act, the House's 5-year surface transportation reauthorization proposal. And this bill makes meaningful change in transportation policy to respond, as I said, to the climate and equity crisis by investing in safer streets, passenger rail, and public transit. While the new funding for public transit in the bill attempts to incentivize better service, my proposal would go even further by creating a new program dedicated only to improving service. And there is a long way to go before the bill becomes law this year. And I'm hopeful that we can include my bill in that legislation. My bill actually complements the Invest Act and the President's American Jobs Plan. You can see where President Biden in his American Jobs Plan and his American Families Plan looks holistically about life in America. And so when it comes to the transportation part of those bills of those plans, we can see things like the recognition of the fact that we're all in the same boat together, or we're actually in the same bus together, even though some of us may not be on it. But if those of us who can't get, if those who can't get to work by any means other than being on the bus miss work, then it's going to affect everybody. And so this kind of holistic thinking that is a part of the new Biden administration Build Back Better plan is consistent with the aspirations of this legislation. And it's really only costing $80 billion. I mean, that's a lot of money, but the effect of it will be much greater, and it'll generate more than enough money to really essentially pay for itself. So we can't lose by investing in America and investing in Americans. And it's just so many angles that this bill is able to address. And it is something that we're going to work hard to make sure that it is a part, excuse me, of the Invest Act when it passes, and part of the American Jobs Plan when it passes, because the Invest Act is actually a part of the American Jobs Plan.
Wonderful. And I guess as a follow-up to that question, you mentioned as far as supporting the bill of what we can do to help. Is there anything else that a lot of the groups and a lot of the folks that do ride transit who are on this call can do to help in the meantime on the ground?
Yeah, I think to let your local, state, and especially federal officials know that you support that bill, and you want to see it included in the American Jobs Plan as an essential element. We've got to give transit agencies the wherewithal to be able to extend service to communities that don't have it, and to also increase the frequency of service in those communities that transit currently reaches. It's a matter of equity, and it's also, you know, a matter of doing justice to our environment, because I mean, so many people would rather kick back on public transit that is safe and gets them to where they need to go in time. They'd rather do that than be stuck in traffic. They can be doing some, they can be working, they can be reading, doing whatever, watching videos, whatever they want to do during that time, that otherwise their attention would be fixated on getting around that car that's too slow up in front of them, and all of you all are stuck in traffic and you're getting frustrated and everything. We could put all of that aside, get on public transit, and get to where we are going. And so it is really the way to go. It's the way of the future. We can build roads and increase capacity on our roads until kingdom comes, and we will still be stuck in traffic if we don't start converting to public transit in this country. And so, yeah, we can't pave up every stretch of right of way, and you know, we can't put asphalt and concrete down over all surfaces within America. We don't. Let's stop right now and let's start investing in some things that have an immediate impact on people's ability to first of all be safe from asthma and the effects of all of the ill effects of greenhouse gases and exhausts, and the overall impact that has on our environment. You know, let us have equity for people who need to be able to get to where they're going, and they can't afford a car because wages have not kept pace with productivity in this country, and all of the wealth is shifting to you know, the upper class. Let's make it such that folks can actually participate in this economy and bring home some of the bacon for themselves and their families. So it's a win-win situation.
Absolutely. And like I said before, everybody, if you have any questions, please drop it down in the chat. Thank you to Scott Goldstein, who is definitely answering a lot of these questions in the chat. But we'll take it to Regina Eberhardt, who's from the Transport Workers Union, or TWU, and she's going to ask a question if she'd like to. Regina?
Hi, actually, not a question, but more so a quick thank you and support. I just wanted to lift up, Congressman, you have always been a champion on transportation issues overall, whether it's transit, airline issues, anything we've brought to your attention, you have been extremely supportive. And of course, working with your amazing staff, Scott, who reached out to labor and just wanted to make sure that we had the appropriate labor protections in the bill, which they are in the bill. So just wanted to say thank you for that, because it's easy for a lot of these equitable legislations to move forward to bring more transit, but we want to make sure that the right that union jobs are protected in the process, and a lot of those labor protections are transferred as you know, funding becomes available for these new projects. So again, your office ensured to make sure those protections were in the bill, and just wanted to share that with everyone, that we're not just supporting an amazing bill that expands public transit, but that it also expands and lifts up union protections along the way. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Regina. Your collective bargaining has taken a hit as the wealth of the country has shifted to those at the top. It's been at the expense of workers, and it's no coincidence that the attacks on organized labor have increased while the wealth has decreased for working people. And so in order to reverse that, it makes sense that you're going to have to protect and even enhance the ability of workers to organize and collectively bargain. So I'm a union guy ever since I've been in Congress. I made a conscious decision to be on the side of labor as opposed to the labor or the corporations. And I mean, everybody has a part. Every sector has a part to play, and every sector needs to be represented. And for me, I've always been for the working people. Other folk can be for the corporations, and I respect that. But somebody's got to be out there on behalf of the working people, and so I proudly take that mantle and have run with it for the 15 years that I've been in Congress, and look to continue to run with it. So thank you, Regina.
All right, and now we're going to bring in David Roscow from the Amalgamated Transit Union in to ask a question. David?
Hi, thank you. Thank you, Congressman. And I concur with my colleague Regina, who I know well, with everything, your support for public transit, your support for labor, on behalf of our international president, John Costa, and our locals in Georgia, 732 and 1324 in Savannah. Thank you for everything you're doing, and we definitely support this bill in terms of expanding public transit, especially service to these communities. I did have one question I wanted to ask. This may not be specific to this bill, but with the American Jobs Plan. But one question I had is, like, one concern for us as workers is that with the new technologies and the zero emission buses and other vehicles in public transit, one thing that we're very concerned about is ensuring that our members are properly trained to not only to repair these because it's different technology, but also to operate these because it's very different how an electric bus and an electric train is operated than a diesel gas bus. So I want to hear your thoughts on the importance of training and ensuring that these workers are properly trained to deal with these new technologies and to fight climate change and the role that plays.
Yeah, education so important, and re-education so important. I can't speak to the provisions within the American Jobs Plan or the Families Plan that may impact that. I do know that there are monies in the Jobs Plan for education, higher education. And Scott, do you have anything you might add to that? Any more specific knowledge? But the point that you raised, David, logically follows. As you rebuild better, build back better with new technology, it stands to reason that you're going to have some education investment so that the existing workers and those who are coming up to assume these jobs have to have the expertise to be able to operate and maintain these new facilities. Anything you want to add to that, Scott?
No, I think you said it very well, Congressman. There's language throughout the Jobs Plan and the Invest Act that seeks to make sure that the workforce is prepared to maintain this new technology like electric buses and operate it going forward, and preserve the workforce. And as I pointed out in the chat, your bill is a direct investment in the workforce because it's the workers who operate the service. It's not a capital investment. You're buying people's time to run this service. And so this is a real direct investment in jobs that are typically really well-paid jobs with great benefits at transit agencies. But David, we can follow up with you and talk more about the specific training issues that you're looking at and see how we can maybe help lift them up. That'd
be great. Thank you again, Congressman, for all your support, because as you said, like a lot of these bills end up more on capital expenditures, and we love to see this operating expenditure because service and the communities of color and less lower income communities need this service because they depend on it. So I really appreciate that, and we do. Thank you.
It's actually part of the investment in people. So infrastructure includes that intangible, that human element, workers, and their ability to actually get the job done. So it's like a new day in Washington, D.C., a fresh new way of looking at rebuilding America, including rebuilding its people.
Absolutely.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
And now we have Shirley Hamilton from the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP. Shirley, go ahead.
Thank you, Congressman. I wanted to share something with you that I found out the other day. I am president of the Niagara Falls branch of the NAACP, which is located in Niagara Falls, New York. Niagara Falls, New York is one of the poorest areas in New York State. We have the largest African-American population in the city of Niagara Falls. We have a lot of injustice issues with the police, but it's not just that, it's the systematic injustice for the judicial system. I was speaking with a judicial candidate the other day, and he informed me, he said, you know, Shirley, he said, a lot of African Americans don't serve on the jury. And he said, and a lot of it is because of transportation issues. He said, my clients, they plead guilty because of the fact that they don't see a jury of their peers, and they think that they're going to be found guilty anyway. Niagara Falls is run by the NFTA, the Niagara Transportation Authority, and they run the bus system in Buffalo, Niagara Falls, Lockport, all of Niagara County, and all of Erie County. They removed the direct bus from the city of Niagara Falls to Lockport, New York. Lockport, New York is our county judges, courts, and everything there. They removed that so that now, in order to get a bus to Lockport, which is approximately 30 minutes away, by bus it was 45 minutes. You have to go to Buffalo and then go to Lockport, which makes a 30 to 40 minute drive, a 2-hour transportation ride. Buses don't run on time when it comes to being there on court on time and getting out. Which means you have to leave at like 5 o'clock in the morning in order to make court at 8 or 9 o'clock. So I wanted to say that not only will your bill, not only can you use the examples that you have used, but I hope you consider the injustice that is contributed by the lack of transportation and direct routes in your fight. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that perspective. And when you mentioned Niagara Falls, it brought to my mind, I know that there had been some movement in the civil rights arena that took place in Niagara Falls. And so
the Niagara movement.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I Googled this, and I'm going to, I don't really know much about Niagara Falls, other than the fact that it's got, you know, the falls there. And I've been there once to look at the falls, but never have I heard much about what actually goes down in Niagara Falls. I'm interested in finding out more about that. But the issue that you raise in terms of transit equity and structural racism caused by the lack of equity in transit. I mean, it is so very important. And practically speaking, you know, when folks can't get to court, we know that the justice the criminal justice system feeds on Black folks. There's a lot of money that's being made in the criminal justice system, not just in the operation of detention facilities, but in all of the activities that have to take place in detention facilities, like phones, like food, like medical care, like equipment, you know, all of these facets of the enterprise of incarceration, whether or not the incarceration is managed by a public entity or a private entity, it's still a lot of private enterprise that's taking place. So it's a prison and jail industrial complex, and it feeds off of African Americans and people of color. It always had. And so it's really ironic that while feeding off of those people, it's also creating processes by which people can be fed into the system. And you do that by knowing that they don't have transportation, but yet you systematically withdraw service to the areas where those people live, and then they're caught up in the justice system just from walking down the street, jaywalking, or allegedly, or smoking a joint, or in the case of Eric Garner, you know, selling loose cigarettes allegedly, or like George Floyd allegedly trying to pass off a $20 bill, which does he know? How do you know that he knew that it was counterfeit, if it was in fact counterfeit? But anyway, we get caught up, taken to jail for the least little thing, and then the courts are overcrowded, and you know, your court case gets put off, and you have to keep coming back and back to court again and again, and bam, can't make court on time. Now you got a warrant out for failure to appear, and it's just, you know, one thing after another. So transit equity can play a small part, or can play a meaningful part in addressing that kind of structural racism that exists in the systems under which we live. So thank you for that. Thank you for that question and observation.
Thank you.
And Congressman, we want to be respectful of your time. So we want to thank you so much for your appearance today and for answering all of our questions. We really thank you for showing up, and we will definitely follow up with you for all of the movement that you'll have on this bill, as well as with going out and supporting and gathering support for this bill. But on behalf of everyone at Labor Network for Sustainability and all the groups that are part of this call, we thank you tremendously.
Thank you, Bakari, and thanks everyone for being on the call, and anything we can be of assistance with in my office in your regard, please let us know. And thank you all so much.
And Congressman Johnson, I want to offer a challenge to you. Since you're such a supporter of transit equity, we would like for you to make this an annual or twice a year event. I think that would be awesome, so we can see where you are and how we can support you and your efforts, and then you can help us to encourage us to keep going for all of the good bills you're introducing. What do you think about that? Yes, I put you on the spot.
Yeah, it sounds like a winner.
Okay, we'll be in touch. Thank you again.
Okay, all right, y'all have a great day.
You too, Congressman. Thank you so much.
All right.